The Kev Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a massive, huge, warm welcome back to everyone that is tuned in live tonight. You're listening to me, your host, Kev Baker. This is The Kev Baker Show, and you're tuned in live to the Truth Frequency Radio Network. I'm so looking forward to tonight's show. But for our regular listeners out there, you've guessed it, Johnny Whistle's internet for the third night this week is still playing up. So fingers crossed he will be back with us tomorrow. But never fear, I've still got an amazing hour of radio for all of you to sit back and enjoy. But before we get there, I don't ask you to do much, guys, right? I really don't. But if you could, we're over on iHeartRadio right now. And if you listen to either Truth Frequency radio stream or the Beyond the Veil stream on iHeartRadio, I would love for you to leave just a couple of words, just a moment of your time to make a comment in the comments section. That will help TFR fly up the iHeartRadio charts, and it will help you be a part of TFR. Now, tonight, I'm going to let you all in on a little-known secret, and that is that right now, we are living in times that I often describe as the most interesting of times. But the thing is, we are all pawns in a psychological war being waged by the elite satanic cabal. Now, this cabal are literally trying to bring about a revolution that will redesign society and have us questioning our very reality. We are all being subjected to attacks on various levels by silent weapons, in this, the most silent of wars. Now, tonight, I'm rejoined by a guest that I would personally describe as probably one of the world's leading researchers into topics including gangstalking, electronic warfare, and asymmetric warfare, and the technology that is used to implement it. And his name is Dr. Eric Carlstrom. Now, Dr. Eric Carlstrom was a professor of geography at the California State University, Stanislaus, recently completed a 30-year teaching career. Now, he taught physical and environmental geography courses, as well as courses cross-listed with the geology department and an honours course. Throughout his career, Dr. Carlstrom has continued his research program in soils and geomorphology as a means of reconstructing quaternary paleoclimates. He is also the author and co-author of many earth science publications. And tonight, he's right here with us. Now, you can find some of his work on the following sites: 911nwo.com, and what will be more appropriate probably for tonight's information will be gangstalkingmindcontrolcults.com. So before we get into any of this, Dr. Carlstrom, welcome back to the show, sir.
Well, thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be with you again. You're a little bit too kind in your introduction. I don't consider myself perhaps a leading authority on gangstalking, mind control, and cults. I'm certainly trying to come to grips with these topics as fast as I can, and to get other people thinking along these lines, and to everybody. The more people are on board, the more people that are working on this to educate themselves and each other, I think the better chance we have as a society to understand what's happening, and that's why I really appreciate your show and you having me on here. Yeah, I'd like to continue our discussion of last week. It's great to be able to talk, with kind of a little mini series here. I think we kind of have to agree, going into this thing that a hard truth is better than a pleasant lie, and because at least a hard truth tells you, which direction we should be looking out for, to protect ourselves, whereas a pleasant lie, we have no clue. And of course, our leaders are Machiavellians. They're schooled in Machiavellian thought, which is, the ends justify the means, might makes right. divide and conquer, and you have to lie to the people. So the lies that we live in, that are really fabricated often by our intelligence agencies, serve then as a way to accomplish objectives that our ruling elite would rather not level with us about. For instance, they'd like to invade this country and that country and that country and that country and get their resources. They don't really want to pay for them, so they let the military do that and just conquer them. And then all these fabrications, all these cover stories. Well, in fact, if you look at the dynamics of a spy, he's always got a cover story. He's always telling you he's somebody he's not, and then he's lying to you. Well, it's like that when you have nations run by intelligence agencies like the CIA and MI6 and Mossad, etc. So with that, let's get into this subject that we've been calling gang stalking, and I think it's a misnomer. Let's look at that. I have been learning a lot about the New World War in a book that's written by Mark M. Rich. It's called New World War: Revolutionary Methods for Political Control. And this is extremely well documented. He goes through lots of military documents and patents, and other documents that support his research on various topics like who is the new enemy in the New World War, and what's the strategy that's going to be used against that new enemy, and what are the secret technologies that can be used, with plausible deniability to go ahead and go after the internal enemies of a country.
And
Now,
Doc, what sometimes surprises me, because although most of this is highly secretive, the patents for some of these toys, or electronic weapons would be a better way of calling it, they've been on the books for years, haven't they? And they're quite out in the open about the kind of tools and devices that they have.
Yeah, so much of this goes back to the mind control research of the CIA with their MK Ultra program starting in 1953, which built on their Operation Bluebird and Artichoke and the Navy's Chatter program, and that built on the Nazi experiments in the concentration camps, and then that actually built on the work that was done by Sir John Rawlings Rees right after World War I. In England, when they started the Tavistock Institute. Basically, they were studying shell-shocked soldiers, not to try to heal them, but to figure out, okay, now how did this person become traumatized and disoriented? How can we apply those same kinds of things and traumatize the masses? So this kind of research was carried on by Sir John Rawlings Rees, who's Brigadier General, head of the Psychological Warfare Division of the British Army, going back to 1921 and probably even before that. And so there's this 100-year history of this kind of mind control research, and much of it is classified, much of it is in books. And it's a very, very, very deep and dark rabbit hole. I spent a year in 2012 writing about mind control history and applications, and I have to tell you, this was a very, very unpleasant topic. Again, malevolence. There's an overlap with Satanism in this topic, which cannot be denied, and so it took me a while to kind of regroup and recoup after that. And
a year to write that actual article because it was so harrowing, so dark.
Yes, yeah, I read lots of books, but it took me a year to write that article. It's on my websites, and there's a lot. It summarizes a lot of information. But when I left it, I was kind of, emotionally. It was going into the ninth circle of hell of Dante's Inferno. You're right down there with the devil himself, and you have to have a real strong fortitude, a constitution, or strong faith, even to withstand that kind of spiritual toxicity. And when I finished the study, I really didn't understand very well how all this was going to be used. I mean, I did it from a historical point of view. Now I totally understand how it is being used, because I've, in the last year, started my Gangstalking Cults.com website, which grew out of the 911NWO.com website. This is what these programs, the modern Gangstalking. It's a very poor name, and I would like to get into that. But it is kind of a modern extension of the MK Ultra mind control programs, in combination with the FBI's COINTELPRO counterintelligence program of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which incorporates many of the aspects of the Phoenix program, which was the citizen neutralization program that occurred in the Vietnam War, and also aspects of MHK, CIA, other program going on simultaneously in the late 60s to spy on American dissidents. And all these things build on the Russian Cheka, KGB, Stasi of East Germany, and down the list of all these repressive totalitarian dictatorships. So what we're dealing with in this program is a system for a lockdown, a political lockdown, a totalitarian imposition of a fascist totalitarian neo-feudal state. And unless people wake up and resist powerfully, this is coming down awfully quickly.
And that is the war that we're in right now, whether we like it or not. And the doc came up with a brilliant name for this. It's going to be the name of a future article as well. And he calls it the Protocols of Gangstalking. Now, during the introduction, I mentioned the fact we're under a psychological battle right now. And I think the doc would agree with me that whether it's easy for you to accept or not, one thing that we absolutely have to get our heads around is that all of these programs, as well as the psychological aspect to them, there's a spiritual and a satanic aspect to them as well. And it might seem very far from your mindset or your beliefs, but the important thing is, and I'll get the doc to add to this, is the fact that when you look at this elite cabal who are at the top and utilizing these tools, they are doing it from a satanic standpoint, aren't they, Doc?
I believe that's true, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support that. In my 911NWO.com website, I came to the conclusion that the leadership was Judeo-Masonic Satanist, and of course Masonry being a Gentile front for Judaism, which the great author, the world's leading, or Britain's main war correspondent during World War II, Douglas Reed, wrote a book called The Controversy of Zion, and he is a very fat book with a lot of information, and he concluded that Judaism is a political program disguised as religion. Well, I think he got half of it. I think the other half that he missed is that it's more or less disguised as the religion of the Old Testament, but it's actually the religion of ancient Babylon, which is the mystery religion, which is the worship of Satan, the serpent cult. And so their main texts now are not the Old Testament, but rather the Babylonian Talmud, which is something like 34 volumes, and the Babylonian Kabbalah, which is this system of dark black magic. Now, there are other serpent cults in the world, but this seems to be by far the most dangerous and powerful. And of course, Masonry then becomes the screen for all these secret societies that are allied, and we can go down the list. There's just an enormous number of them. A lot of the New Age groups were spun out by this central serpent cult. So yes, this is the thing that's hard for people to wrap their brains around, I think, and I understand that and sympathize with that. But if we look at the center of this thing, we do see that theurgy, or the summoning of spirits, summoning of angels, dark angels or whatever, is a common practice amongst our leaders. And so a lot of them would be possessed by virtue of that. A lot of them would rape their own children. In this thing called satanic ritual abuse, which causes multiple personality disorder, now called dissociative identity disorder. So maybe 100 or 1,000 alter personalities were split off before the child was 6 years of age. And these identities then can be named by a trainer, and you can insert a demon spirit or an animal spirit, or you can make a sex slave or a super soldier or a courier or somebody with a photographic memory, whatever. And of course then the CIA got a hold of these. This goes back to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, this kind of thing, making these kind of human zombies who are programmed like a computer. And the CIA got scientific about it and said, okay, let's take these things and see if we can, incorporate with them, the latest scientific information out of all the sciences at the university and through our hospitals and our greatest doctors and psychiatrists. So what we've looked now at the kind of the blending of academe with this very dark stuff and the intelligence agencies. And this then becomes all part of the arsenal of secret weapons then that the elite have to use to neutralize the masses. And they use it in things like trauma-based mind control of the masses, such as occurred on 9/11. As deliberately, an act of trauma-based mind control for the masses. We saw the towers coming down day and day. The assassination of Kennedy, likewise, was trauma-based mind control for the masses. And what happens then, of course, is that, people get so shocked. It's like a shell-shocked soldier. They get so shocked, they dissociate. They become disoriented. And then the leader, George Bush, steps forward and says, "Oh, well, don't worry, I've got everything under control. Go shopping," and all this is very well scripted and understood by the masters of these techniques. But yeah, let me go back a ways and talk about Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is one of the major presidential advisors, to Obama, and then going way back to the Carter administration, co-founded the Trilateral Commission with David Rockefeller. So definitely an insider. He wrote a book in 1970, Between Two Worlds, America's Role in the Technotronic Age. And in this book, he stated there's going to be a new arsenal of weapons that is being developed at that time, including weather weapons, chemical and biological weapons, death rays. This goes to Tesla technology, the invisible directed energy weapons, electronic warfare, psychotronic warfare. And he stated that these weapons could be used to conduct, quote, secret warfare that only a minimum number of our leaders and security forces would need to know about. So everybody else can be kind of clueless. And some of these weapons, he said, then in 1970, the directed energy weapons could be used for assassinations under conditions that offered plausible deniability. Well, yeah, you've got plausible deniability because people can't see these weapons. They are invisible, and they go at the speed of light. And they've figured out, which frequencies and which wavelengths, can be used to target different organs of the body to create different moods, anxiety, anger, etc. They've mapped the brain to the point where they can actually use remote neural monitoring to, like a brain print, to follow any person anywhere on the planet, believe it or not. And of course, we now have the Global Information Grid, the GIG, which is hooked up to our local 4 CISR units, which stands for Command and Control Communications and Computers, Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance. And each of our branches in the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, probably Coast Guard as well, will have these mobile command and control centers that or can be fixed or can be virtual even, in which a commander then is able to get real-time information from from the global information grid and networked through digital radios and all kinds of high-tech things to other areas. And then he can command various nodes, i.e. the perpetrators out in the streets, to do this or that and such action, which would then have such and such an effect on the targeted individual who they're trying to neutralize, break their will, etc., based on psychological operations. And all of this is almost unimaginable to people. It is all part of the new war. Now, let me read a little bit about what this guy, this author says, Mark M. Rich, it kind of sets the stage. He says, the pattern of infiltration, state-sponsored terrorism, repressive legislation, control of developmental areas of society, enemy creation, and wars is characteristic of the process of dictatorship creation. Here, multiple groups form a single network to establish complete control. Part of this RMA, which stands for Revolution and Military Affairs, includes a change in competing forces because most nations can't challenge the U.S. with a direct military force. Now that most nations have been conquered, either by military might or economic subversion, the regular state-to-state type of warfare will be phased out. The U.S. and its allies will now be waging war against individuals and groups all across the planet. The global military campaign being used to wage this new type of warfare has been called the Global War on Terror, GWOT, and the Long War, capital LW. Names given for the small wars to be waged globally include 4GW, Fourth Generation Warfare, Asymmetrical Warfare, AW, Netric-Centric Warfare, NCW, or Net War, NATO Networked Enabled Capability, NNEC, Military Operations Other Than War, capital MOOTW, Low Intensity Conflict, LIC, Irregular Warfare, IW, and Unconventional Warfare, UW, Effects-Based Operations, EBO, Civil Military Operations, CMO, and Peace Operations. These wars are interagency, international operations that use a combined, highly coordinated, and synchronized approach to achieve, quote, unity of effort, also known as unified action during attacks. Organizations involved include local and state law enforcement, which cooperates with federal agencies, and the host nations, that's HN, host nations military. In the U.S., this means the FBI, the NSA, the CIA, and FEMA. Federal Emergency Military Authority, or Management Authority, used to be Military Authority. Militaries of most nations are participating through NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. They're working with the civilian populations as part of civil support, also called Civil Military Operations, CMO. Non-military participants include non-governmental organizations, NGOs, private voluntary organizations, PVOs, and intergovernmental organizations, IGOs. Nationally, this combined force is called the interagency. Globally, it's called the multinational force, MNF. So directed by the UN. Okay, now the battlefield has expanded into the civilian sector in this new war. For this reason, it is called the battle space. The battle space is global. The battles take place among the civilian population, where the military, almost like a hidden hand, uses civilians as irregular forces. The physical architecture of the battle space has several levels. At the top is the space level, which includes satellites. The near space level has UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and high-flying aircraft. Then there is the maneuver level, which contains people, robots, vehicles, ships, and low-flying aircraft. Okay, well, this all fits in with the, 2017 military budget in the United States of $773.5 billion, and the goal of which is full spectrum dominance of the planet from the bottom of the ocean to space. And so now we see that the new war is meant to be conducted anywhere on the planet and everywhere. And now we have a structure, which is what I'd like to talk about for this new war. This is all in the military documents, using the kind of terms that I've thrown out there, unconventional warfare, etc.
So we're almost on the break, so I don't want you to get cut off. We can start laying that out after the break. But where can people go and find your site? Where can they read that big, long article that you wrote about all of this? Give that a shout out before we go to the break, Doc.
Well, my two articles that are pertinent here are 911nwo.com, which has an enormous amount of information, which I think shows that 9/11 itself was a, synthetic state-sponsored, made in America terror event, which used all the techniques of this new war. In fact, the PSYOP element was there, and the directed energy weapons were there, as well as the satanic symbolism of the Masons, etc. So you have, and of course, the banking fraud was part of it. So this is a multi-layered operation, but I think you could say 9/11 definitely part of this new war technology, and we could talk many shows about that, Kev, because there's so much information on that site, and then also the other site, Gangstalking, mind control.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
We are back already. I'm your host, Kev Baker. We're moving into the second half of the Kev Baker Show, and tonight I'm joined by the brilliant Dr. Eric Carlstrom. Now, you can find his work over at 911nwo.com or www.gangstalkingmindcontrolcults.com. So then, before the break, we were getting into what we are calling the protocols of mind control. And Doc, I'm just going to give it back to you because it's good that we didn't get cut off by the break there. Fresh segment, fresh start. And before I let you get back into it, we are going to be continuing our series of shows. You're an absolutely brilliant researcher. You collate all of these facts, these acronyms, and you just rattle them off. And we're all blessed to have this information presented to us tonight. I just want to thank you for your time, Doc.
Well, thank you so much, Kev, for helping me get it out. It's like the old Bob Dylan song, "The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind." In this case, the answer, my friend, is in the acronyms and the alphabet soup. If you go into this book by Mark Ridge, New World War, Revolutionary Methods for Political Control, he just pulling out all these acronyms and alphabet soup terms right out of the military documents. And once you start to come to grips with these things, then you realize the kind of world that is being set up around us. Now, we are talking about the three protocols of gangstalking here, and we'll see why that term is appropriate. The first one let's talk about is it kind of involves the complete restructure and criminalization of society to create the desired New World Order, one world government, neo-feudalistic order. What they want is a system that will provide them a self-policing fascist police state. So our neighborhood watch groups and our volunteer police groups then can be commandeered by the local fusion centers and the Joint Terrorism Task Force of the FBI, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security fusion centers, much as you had provincial interrogation centers in the Vietnam War to torture the civilian population of Vietnam, because they didn't want the civilians to give any support to the quote-unquote insurgents, that is to say the Viet Cong. Well, it's the same thing. They're trying to apply the same techniques here.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we see the See Something and Say Something program over in the US, and over here in the UK, people are so quick to just run to the police, whatever the problem is. Be it something the neighbour's up to. And it really is, it's quite shocking how people are so willing, Doc, to turn on their fellow citizens.
It really is remarkable. And of course, all of this is predicated on the fact that people respect their governments. And the idea, national security, ma'am, I can't tell you, or it's public safety, or, and people need to, I'm afraid, be a little more realistic and jaundiced and realize that how corrupt our governments are, and that they hide behind these terms, national security, et cetera, to cover up their own crimes. And so people would rather live, believing in their government, even when there's an enormous amount of evidence how corrupt those governments are. And so this is one of the things that a lot of this is a battle for legitimacy. It's like Joseph Goebbels said, the head ministry of propaganda under the Nazis said, truth is the greatest enemy of the state. Well, when you have a government in the United States that carried out 9/11, and then you have people like me pointing that out and proving that that's the case, you can see why they might be a little upset with people like me, and they might want to neutralize us with one of these techniques. And this is why I think I have been NEM considered one of these internal adversaries, potential homegrown terrorist threat, blah, blah, blah. They can use lots of terms, non-state actor. And then all of a sudden, the full force of the U.S. military, the local law enforcement, federal agencies, your citizens committees and your NGOs, the whole society then can be turned against that individual to neutralize them as a threat. So what you have is society itself become a predator against anyone who might want to tell the truth or uphold the Constitution or maintain Christian values or educate their children at home or whatever. I mean, these are the kind of people that they're targeting. So here's what Rich says. He says, although these are military operations, again, the military itself does not participate in this warfare on the tactical level. Instead, it uses the host nation's civilian population as surrogate stand-in forces and directs them from behind the scenes. They refer to this as population-centric war. So yeah, this is just basically creating an invisible civil war in the society, which has to destroy the society. 2003 Boston Globe article said the Department of Homeland Security, which was brand new almost at that time, wanted to recruit 100 million citizen spies. That's out of 320 million. So that's almost 1 out of 3 Americans. Now, a spy is a liar by definition. And he's also a scumbag because he's ratting on people and whatnot. So now you've got 1/3 of the American people ratting on the other 2/3 and spying on them and harassing them and doing whatever they're told to punish those other people.
And
this is going to cause the breakdown of society.
Would I be right in saying that they actually want to target as many people as possible because it's all about collating the data that comes back from these individual cases, isn't it?
I think that's part of it. We talked last time, Kev, about, Dr. John Hall, who's written a book, Guinea Pigs, The Technologies of Control. He identified 6 phases of targeting. First being selection. Somehow you're put on these terrorist watch lists or whatever, death lists, if you want to look at it from the Operation Phoenix point of view. And then the surveillance kicks in, and surveillance can be very, very active, and it can also be very, very obtrusive and can harass a citizen up to death itself. And then you have the stalking phase, where you have all these, citizen stalkers kind of coordinated by these 4C ISR command and control stations to swarm in on the target. These nodes are synchronized to swarm in and to terrorize or freak out the target. This is after they've done the psychological profiles to figure out how to best destroy the will of the target, because that is the goal. So yeah, that's the third phase, stalking, and that goes along with defamation. So you actually have these people going out into the community and spreading false rumors. This person's a prostitute, this person's a pedophile, whatever. And then you have the direct energy attacks, and then you have the monitoring. So all of this then is done with very, very sophisticated technologies, including these electronic technologies. So and instant feedback, real-time kinds of things. So, but all this being carried out in the local cities, especially the urban areas. So they refer to this as population-centric war. The U.S. Army says that in order to accomplish the recruitment of the host nation's population, they will study the culture, taboos, beliefs, customs, history, goals, ethnic composition, and expectations of the civilian population and exploit those. And it refers to these unarmed civilian forces as the mass base, the general population, and society at large. So a TI would call these people perpetrators. Sometimes the term is surveillance role players. people are actually paid full-time or part-time to do this. Sometimes you'll get volunteers, volunteer police, networks and things like that. So not only does this include a large portion of the civilian population, but also the private sector, such as stores, businesses, and restaurants. So what they're basically describing is the recruitment of all significant components of a society. And yet the Army is not talking about arming this major portion of the society, but using them to carry out specific acts which support their targeting of individuals. So On the ground level, most perpetrators would just simply be taking orders from, their commander, and these orders would go through, say, cell phones or iPads, or I think there's probably other ways. I think they're also probably using voice-to-skull technologies for many, where they put voices directly in the brain. That technology has been out there, gosh, since the 50s and 60s. And so the individuals on the ground and the groups that are doing this may, in fact, be witting or not witting in this fact that they're part of a unconventional warfare operation. So they become more or less pawns, useful idiots in this United States of hell, or Scotland of, this is global. And as you probably know, people who are complaining of these kinds of things, of being targets, are all over the world. One of the examples of the U.S. Army documents stating, without recognized legitimacy, military operations do not receive the support of the indigenous population, the U.S. population, or the international community. So this is our strategy, Kev. They're claiming legitimacy. What they're doing is criminal. In America, they're violating the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment rights. That's the constitutional rights. Gangstalking is a criminal felony in every state. It's illegal. And yet they get away with this because they have so much power and because people are so ignorant and, dare I say, stupid. So it's our job to wake people up to where they become a little bit suspicious of this authority figure, or this person who claims to be an authority figure. And there's a great YouTube video where this goes back to the Milgram experiment, which goes back, I think, to Yale many decades ago, which shows that 65-70% of the population will go ahead and harm their fellow citizens if an authority figure tells them to do it, because they figure they're not responsible for it. And this is a real flaw in human nature as far as I'm concerned, because this means they're pawns, they're useful idiots. This YouTube I'm talking about has a guy pretending to be an FBI agent saying, oh, that lady kidnapped that child. And he tells this, at just a little farmer's market situation to a young man who has a baby as well, and he just turned into a father. And then the would-be FBI agent tells him to please, go get the stroller and recover the baby, which he does. And of course, turns out that the woman's with her own child, and he just stole the child from the mother. This is the kind of foolish obedience to authority and the kind of result that comes from that. This authority figure just flashed a badge. He wasn't a policeman. He just flashed a badge. So this is a really sad aspect of human nature that we have to kind of work on.
I've always said that, the fact that humans, we seem absolutely determined to look for an authority figure. We always want to put somebody in power. And the person who wants to attain that power, they're flawed. Who wants to have all that power in the first place? And I think some of that junk DNA, it has that built into it. It's like we almost seek out that pyramid system, Doc, where it's somebody at the top and everyone else underneath. And, all this stuff we're talking about, this digital harassment, gang stalking, it comes on so many levels. And I witness it firsthand doing a radio show. Got a good friend as well who I know is under this kind of attack. And not only that, but on a more kind of micro scale, even the truth community, if we can call it that. We've got paid trolls. We've got people who just love to turn on their fellow truthers and throw hate about. There's so many different levels and aspects to this worldwide warfare.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I was watching the 911 truth movement from the get-go, and I saw how infiltrated it was and co-opted. And, in fact, the whole 911 truth movement was probably orchestrated from the beginning by the powers that be, because they knew they had to co-opt they knew there would be a pushback by, smart people. So they were in on the ground floor of it. But let's get back to these protocols. What we're dealing with here is the use of non-lethal weapons. This is the name given. to these directed energy weapons and PSYOP, but they're scalable, which means that they can easily be lethal. But they're also called no-touch torture, soft kill, silent kill, slow kill. All of this, again, to neutralize the state's internal enemies, so that, you know, a relatively tiny number of elites of a nation can control the entire society, and especially neutralize the individuals and groups that might lead to widespread political protest. That is to say, individuals who might have, you know, whose thinking might affect their neighbors. So the protocols then would include the use of these fairly top secret technologies that have been developed over the last 100 years. And I'm talking about PSYOP. Each of these is an enormous topic in and itself. Electronic warfare, directed energy weapons, which include high-powered microwaves, lasers, acoustic weapons, extremely low frequencies, radio frequencies, silent subliminal sound, RHIC EDM, radio hypnotic intracerebral control, and electronic dissolution of memory. This technology was available and probably used in the Kennedy assassination in the early 60s. Remote neural monitoring, HARP, weather modification, weather warfare, geoengineering, chemtrails. These are just some of the weapons in the arsenal, of course, of the military, and they're sharing them with all these other groups. So, if you will, these can be invisible bullets. They can go through walls. They can be tuned up and down in terms of their power and their potency, depending on the desired effect. And then again, the very important part of this is almost the complete restructuring of society, as the military now is utilizing civilians as irregular forces. So we really have become their dupes. So again, this is to control the society at the street level. Now let's go to the next kind of protocol, because I can see we're kind of running out of time here, Kev. Each individual who is targeted or who's been designated an adversary or a, you know, potential terrorist threat or enemy of suspicion or whatever, has for him or her a protocol which has developed by tactical PSYOP teams, which go out into the community and, you know, with all kinds of professionals, and identify the characteristics of these target audiences and targeted individuals, and design protocols for each and every one that will, you know, eventually break their will. This is a long war of attrition, so there's no hurry. This is what these guys love to do. You know, they're not interested in taking you out fast. They're interested in taking you out slow, and it's a war of attrition. So they use multiple interrelated intelligence operations to collect information on these adversaries, their dispositions, their tactics, their intents, their objectives, their strengths, their weaknesses, their values, their capabilities, and of course their critical vulnerabilities. And this then allows for a profile-specific kind of attack. And then they develop the PSYOP then specifically for this individual or this group of individuals. And then there's continuous monitoring back and forth, what's working and what's not working. So there's this feedback loop that is in real time. So then they can constantly tailor make this and make it more effective. So there is the kind of the general protocols of the program, which is global interagency, and now involves almost all sectors of society. And then there are the protocols that are tailor-made for the individual. Now, since we only have a little bit of time left, let me get to the other kind of protocol, which I think is perhaps germane here. Since I identified, the Judeos, Masonic Satanists as the probable instigators of all this, let's go to the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which, was published around 1900 and was thought to have been authored, over maybe a 100 to 200 year period by the Elders of Zion, the rabbinic leadership of Judaism, and first came out about that time of the First World Zionist Conference. So here's some in the words of Hugh Akins, who wrote Synagogue Rising, a Catholic worldview of anti-Christian Judaism and counter-revolutionary resistance. Let me go through what he says about protocols 15, 16, 17, and 18, which I think are very germane. This, in fact, according to Akins, is the battle plan of Judaism. This is a declaration of war against Western Christian civilization. And not only that, it is the battle plan for how to defeat it. And if we look at these things, this is all these protocols, 24 of them, which have been called directives from hell, have been and are being utilized. Protocol 15, in Akins' words, confesses to the most secret political plot and the use of domestic and police agencies, totalitarian police agencies, to bring about police powers such as we are seeing today, with such totalitarian police agencies as the ATF, Alcoholic, Tobacco, and Firearms, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, the TSA, Transportation Security Administration, the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, and the like. This protocol encourages the ruthless suppression of people under these Jewish created police organizations. And then he says, if anybody doubts that the Jews are behind the rising police state in America, well, that's a whole nother discussion, but let's go back to last week, and we pretty much determined that 9/11 was called for in the neoconservatives Project for New American Century manifesto, and that the neoconservatives is a radical conservative group, which is a totally Jewish movement. And then when the 2000 election was stolen and George Bush was installed, these neocons took over top positions in the Bush White House. Immediately they implemented their 9/11, which gave them then carte blanche, billions and trillions of dollars to go ahead and prosecute these wars in the Middle East that benefit greater Israel, destabilize Israel's neighbors, and then set up this international police state, again, with many trillions of dollars based on that event. Protocol 16 covers brainwashing the masses as well, rendering the universities little more than Judaic Masonic institutions of propaganda and mind control. Purpose of subverting education is to turn the goyim, the non-Jews, into unthinking robots. Once corrupted, they'll be easily deceived, manipulated, and recruited for every wicked cause, and always under the pretense of some good. Protocol 17 has to do with the New World Religion and installing the King of the Jews to become the real Pope of the universe. This would be what the Christians call the Antichrist. And Protocol 18, especially germane, deals with precipitating internal disorders, in other words, terrorist events, and then acting swiftly to execute mass arrests of the more dangerous opponents of the Zionist master plan. This is precisely what's behind the policy since the Clinton administration, and increasingly so during the Bush and Obama administrations, to associate Christians, pro-lifers, constitutionalists, Ron Paul conservatives, homeschoolers, Second Amendment advocates, 9/11 truthers, Holocaust revisionists, critics of Israel, and those who oppose the Jewish Federal Reserve and all of the needless wars we fight for Israel, put them on those terrorist lists. All these sincere patriots and Christians are singled out by the government in the hands of the Zionist elders as potential homegrown terrorists. So the reason I'm choosing this word protocols is I think that's a word in which we can use and get the big picture. This protocols of the learned elders of Zion does seem to be the game plan and the strategy by which the world is now being destroyed. Western civilization is now being, we're seeing creative destruction. That's a term that we hear all the time from these neocons. And then, of course, this international police state. So I think that these are related. That's my opinion. I'm sure others will want to differ with that. But I did get the idea out there, Kev, if you'd like to respond to that.
No, I think the reason I'm so happy with the fact you're calling it the protocols of Gangstalking is because when you look at that protocols of Zion, and if you have looked at that document at all, we're living in it right now. What they're using is another it's the macro, and then we've got the micro of the protocols of the Gangstalking to bring it about. It's absolutely perfect. And when you're rhyming off some of the categories of people there, I mean, every single person listening to this show, I said it last week, we are all in the #1 target audience. And that's why it's so important that people really do research this kind of material, Doc.
Yes, and we have to help each other. We have to come to each other's aid. In other words, not be afraid to step up and help each other. Because if we don't, we're going to be taken down one by one. And of course, the strategy of all this is to isolate these individuals, deprive them of all of their support systems, and it says this in the military documents, deprive them of their job and their home and their family and their friends, and get them out on the street where they can really work on you and destroy you. And this is war, and this, of course, these are military plans to destroy individuals, break their will, to change their behavior modification. But it's all based on the infliction of pain. And so it's basic stimulus response from a psychological point of view. We're just going to keep pouring on the pain until you die. And what they want you to do is commit suicide or commit a crime of passion, like kill somebody. And then they can, of course, lock you up or throw you in a mental institution and throw away the key. So all of this is to neutralize and harass. And I do have a term here, Kevin, which I've been working on. Gangstalking is woefully inadequate. It's like calling a nuclear weapon a nuclear bomb a pea shooter. Gangstalking doesn't tell you anything about it. Could be any group that's stalking you. How about instead secret extra-legal citizen harassment and extermination program with an acronym, not a very good one, but SELCHEP. Secret extra-legal citizen harassment and extermination program. And this is in the documents. You go back to the Revolution of Military Affairs by Metz and Kievit back in 1994, which is put out by the U.S. Army War College, and they said, well, Americans really don't go for the idea of imprisoning, let alone killing people without a trial. So we're going to have to use these secret weapons.
Amazing stuff. The Doc will be back one night soon. Wherever you are, make TFR. Then he touch that dial. Stay tuned, everyone.